Namaste. I have a very interesting insight for us too. When we think Acharya Chanakya, or you could even think of Sun Tzu, we think that these were great military strategists. Therefore, they came up with phenomenal war strategies. They came up with ways of how to defeat the enemy and at most times succeeded it. And both of them knew tremendous success, not just at their times of living, but thereafter. For example, the art of war is used even today in various parts of the world, taught at universities and so on and so on. Similarly, the Kautilya Arthashastra, even though perhaps used lesser in other parts of the world, is finding increasing usage in Bharat. Right? I want to tell you that their war strategies were not just based on their mind, their experience, their expertise, their skills, their strength of the army. Most of all, they were based on human psychology. Huh? What do I mean by that? They knew themselves very well, their own armies and kingdoms very well, but they equally knew well the kings who were on the opposite side, the opponents, the enemy side. And not just the kings. They knew everything about that kingdom, that ruler, that king, that state, everything. That's why you will find whether it is Sun Tzu or whether it is Acharya Chanakya, whether in Sanskrit or in Chinese, they're giving the same message. And the message primarily is that if you know yourself, maybe you will win some battles. If you know only the enemy, then you are going to perhaps win a little bit more. If you don't know yourself or the enemy, you will 100%. But if you know yourself and you understand the enemy, victory is certain. So what are they talking about? What is knowing? The knowing is by way of the psyche, the psychology, the behavior, etc., etc. In that direction, Acharya Chanakya, for example, from whatever is known out of history, successfully created a champion ruler, first a general, and then a champion ruler out of Chandragupta Maurya, and used it to create an Akhandavan. You think it was easy? Not in the least, because he had to fight Alexander, he had to fight Dhananand, and he had to bring together at least 10 kingdoms. How do you think he did? He understood the nuances of human psychology so brilliantly that having studied the minds of self as well as others, you could form a certain definite strategy of how people are likely to behave. Based on that behavior, you determined what is to be done from your side. In fact, in Acharya Sutra, one can even find traces of saying that form a strategy, but also role play what the enemy is likely to do, and then form an alternate strategy. How brilliant is that? So the main insight from today is that times may have changed. Of course, there is still a lot of war going on, but we are not going to talk about it. We are going to say that whether you are in business, whether you are in employment, whether you are in public service, please don't depend only on what you read in books or what is already done, but become a great student of human behavior. First, spend time in understanding yourself. In future videos, we will give you more tips how to understand yourself, what are the elements to know about oneself, and also how to study the opponents. Rather, Acharya would say studying the entire ecosystem, all that exists to the extent accordingly you can form strategy. That brings me to my last point. What is strategy? Do you have a definition for strategy? If in your mind you said plan, that's not strategy. Strategy is always formed with respect to a competitor. Therefore, many have defined strategy as a competitive advantage. And it's not competitive advantage for this moment, but it's a sustainable competitive advantage. That itself implies that your plan cannot be in isolation. It is vis-a-vis those who exist in the ecosystem. So here, I'm going to give you a question, some work to do. Who exists? Identify who exists in your ecosystem. Identify at least 3 players, whether they are co-workers, whether it is one boss, one co-worker, one team member. If you are an entrepreneur, who are your 3 closest competitors? If you are in public service, who are those again in your ecosystem that you are serving and those who are hindering? You get the idea? This is your first assignment. Now, having done that, at this point in time, don't do any analysis, but only observe, and put down who they are. What are the first things that come to mind? Dhanyavad.